LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the June 27th edition of LiberalViewer Monday Media Mixup. Thanks for joining me. I'll be using the dozen best, most newsworthy clips from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the big five corporate outlets of NBC, ABC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States, for which it'd be a really informative, educational, fair use media criticism and political commentary show for you all today. You can see the main topic of the video is Roe v. Wade overturned. What next? Because that was, of course, the big news from Friday from the U.S. Supreme Court, overturning 50 years of precedent, taking away a fundamental constitutional right, and threatening to take away a lot more, and I'll be talking about that extensively. I will be committing some legal analysis following up on my May 9th Monday Media Mix-Up. I put a link down to the May 9th one. That was after the draft opinion, very similar to the opinion that came out leaked from the Supreme Court. That was your right to make decisions about marriage, family, and reproduction gone, ? My Monday Media Mix-Up number 49, if you want to see my extended analysis of the right to abortion being in the Constitution, you can check that out. But I'll talk about it a little more even before the news summaries and the newsmaker clips. I'll have three great Democratic women, Senator Elizabeth Warren, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and then candidate for governor of Georgia, Stacey Abrams, all responding to the overturning of Roe v. Wade. And then I'll also have one Republican woman in an extended clip from CBS News Face the Nation, South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem. I don't know, whenever I hear the name Kristi Noem, I think, is she like the leader of the Keebler Elves? But no, that's not my political comedy. I always like to start the show with a little political comedy, and so this one isn't on the main topic, which there's not a lot of comedy in the main topic. This is Jake Tapper was over in Germany for Biden was at a summit of the G7 countries, and this is for my European viewers, and especially I know I have a lot of viewers in the UK, or at least I used to, and I noticed that Jake Tapper got an extended interview with the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Boris Johnson. And Boris Johnson revealed at one point that he was actually born in New York, which I think I'd heard before. And he also used the Americanism that I thought was kind of amusing, and even Jake Tapper thought was kind of amusing, in the clip I will talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
Well, let's talk about that, because Thursday marked 6 years since the UK voted to leave the European Union. That was a cause that you were right on the forefront of. The UK is grappling with skyrocketing inflation, low unemployment, but skyrocketing inflation, cost of living crisis you alluded to, labor shortages, supply chain disruptions, slow wage growth. Is the UK better off than it was 6 years ago when you left the EU?
It is, and we've got, look, what we've been able to do. Let me give you an example. Thanks to the position that we took, we had an independent medical agency that was able to make sure that the first COVID vaccine in first approved COVID vaccine in anybody's arms in the world was in the UK. We then had the fastest vaccine, and that was because we were outside something called the European Medicines Agency.
So if you couldn't have done it if otherwise?
Correctamundo.
Okay.
Yes.
Correctamundo?
Correct.
You're quoting Fonz?
That is right. Secondly, we've been able to do a lot of free trade deals.
So yeah, correctamundo. I don't know if you've been watching the show Barry. It's made me think about the Fonz a lot. There's this HBO show Barry that also stars Henry Winkler in one of the main roles, and every time I think of him, I think about the Fonz, but that's just because I'm so old, I guess, and I actually grew up with that show. But apparently Boris Johnson is around my age, and I don't know if he would live when I know he was born in New York. I didn't hear how long he lived in the U.S., if at all, but maybe someone can tell me in the comment section. But did he grow up watching Happy Days and the Fonz and Correctamundo? I don't know, but anyway, I thought that was amusing. I always look for something amusing to talk about from the news shows if I can't find something from like a real comedian like Bill Maher sort of is. He's taken a break for a month. Maybe I'll take another Bill Maher clip one of these days. I didn't really want to go into his show, and Saturday Night Live will be back in September, I guess, and we'll see if other sources come up. But I did promise that I was going to do a little bit of legal analysis, or commit some legal analysis, as I like to say in my, like as a recovering attorney. That's like two like non-working lawyer jokes. Like, I'm a recovering attorney and I'm going to commit some legal analysis, and it's about the 14th Amendment. That's what I talked about extensively, because that's where in the word liberty in the 14th Amendment, where if you read the 14th Amendment here, it was passed after the Civil War. The 13th Amendment got rid of slavery, but before the Civil War, a lot of people don't know that the Bill of Rights did not apply to state governments at all, and there's a case where the Supreme Court actually decided that Barron versus Baltimore, I can't remember the exact year, but they said, and James Madison actually wanted to impose some restrictions on state government so they couldn't infringe on the rights of their citizens, but they decided not to do that in the original Bill of Rights for the U.S. Constitution, because they figured the states being closer to the people, they wouldn't infringe on people's rights. But of course, that turned out not to be true, especially in terms of slavery, but in other ways. But slavery was the cause of the Civil War, and it was also a cause of the people who wrote the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, looking at the Constitution and figuring out how to fix that problem. And so in the 14th Amendment, they decided that they would say now states do have to, the federal U.S. Constitution is going to say that states do have to respect people's rights, not just through their state constitutions, but that we're going to impose the rights from the Bill of Rights. It doesn't, well, if you look at what it actually says, it says that no state shall deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. And then it says, nor deny them equal protection. But that due process clause, substantive due process, that's the liberty that the 14th Amendment guarantees to everyone in the United States against their state government. So, they say, oh, we're not taking away your right, we're just sending it back to the states. No, you're taking away the right from the 14th Amendment, your right to liberty that's supposed to protect you from state governments. And that liberty, as I said in my May 9th video, if you look at the title, I'm talking about, if you look at it in the right level of generality, we're talking about your, what was the title? Oh, your right to make, it's intimate decisions about marriage, family, and reproduction. And I even talked about how, like, choosing who your family is you want to live with. There was like this case in East Cleveland as to where a housing, public housing where you could only live with family, and meant like a grandma and the grandchild couldn't live together, I believe it was. And it's making choices, intimate decisions about family, marriage, reproduction. And that's an area that's an important liberty that people recognized, and they not only recognized, throughout time, but especially when they were ratifying the 14th Amendment, because they were trying to make up for all the problems of slavery. And I actually saw this NYU professor, Melissa Murray, on the Sunday Show with Jonathan Capehart, making this point so clearly, better than I did on May 9th, that I wanted to start off with that clip before I get to the Sunday shows. Remember, 14th Amendment guarantees liberty, and wanted to make sure that the state governments couldn't take away people's liberties. That's why that's like the original meaning of the 14th Amendment that Melissa Murray talks about more over here.
Say this, the logic of the opinion could obviously be extended to other rights, same-sex marriage, interracial marriage, which Justice Thomas conveniently left out. Contraception, which I think is the most immediate threat. But what it misses is that this guarantee of liberty that's in the 14th Amendment and that was ratified in 1868 was purposely intended to repudiate the incidences of slavery and all of the indicia of slavery, including the fact that slaves did not have bodily autonomy either over their labor or genuinely over their own bodies, sexual coercion, the fact that they had no control over their families, that their children could be sold away from them without notice. That's what the 14th Amendment's guarantee of liberty was intended to capture. So when Justice Alito says that this is not in the Constitution, it is gaslighting. It is in the Constitution. It is understood and was understood by the framers of the 14th Amendment to be encompassed in that general guarantee of autonomy that proceeds from the grant of liberty, and he knows that.
Yes or no, because we're out of...
So yeah, that, even though it doesn't use the word abortion or even reproduction, family, intimate decisions, none of that's in the 14th Amendment. It does say liberty. And then, of course, for those people who say, well, it doesn't expressly say it. It's not, the word isn't in the Constitution, and the Constitution only protects what words are in there. Well, read what the Ninth Amendment says. The Ninth Amendment says you just misconstrued the Constitution if you say that, because the Ninth Amendment is a rule of construing the Constitution, and you are misconstruing it. What does the Ninth Amendment say? It says, the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. So just because they were afraid when they wrote out the Bill of Rights that people would say, oh, those are all the rights and there aren't any more. Well, there are more. And the 14th Amendment was specifically passed, as Professor Melissa Murray said, to make up for the way slaves were treated, where they didn't have control over their bodies, their reproduction, their families, all those choices. Those were the choices that the liberty, that the Due Process Clause, including the word liberty, was meant to protect in the 14th Amendment, what they call substantive due process, which is what Clarence Thomas in his concurrence was saying the court should look at next. That's the Obergefell case that granted same-sex marriage, the Lawrence case that granted a right to consensual sodomy. And why doesn't anyone say that on any of the cable news networks? They don't say consensual sodomy for some reason, even though that's what the Lawrence versus Texas case protects. And then Griswold versus Connecticut that gave married couples the right to use contraception, and is the beginning of this whole right to privacy, this whole right to make intimate decisions about marriage, family, and reproduction that is in the liberty, the word liberty as part of the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment. Anyway, I think I spent enough time doing the legal analysis at the beginning, and now I'm going to get to the news summaries, all 5 of them from longest to shortest. The longest one this week was actually CBS News' Face the Nation, because our old friend Mark Strassmann is still reporting from Atlanta. Remember during the pandemic, there was like all those months he was like knocking on the door of the CDC every day trying to get answers. But I think he's based in Atlanta, someone eventually told me. But he's reporting from Atlanta on the overturning of Roe v. Wade, and Margaret Brennan does the introduction, and they actually put in a whole bunch of different topics. But it's mainly about Roe v. Wade, but they talk about seismic developments in our democracy, Supreme Court, federal gun legislation, the gun case, the January 6th committee hearing, which is a big story that was covered by all of the news programs except for Fox News Sunday, but not all of them at the beginning, and making the point that there was evidence that Trump knew he was acting illegally. That's really important news, even in a week where Roe versus Wade is overturned. And anyway, I will talk about all of that a little more after we watch that news summary together over here.
Good morning and welcome to the Nation. I'm Margaret Brennan. Last week, we saw several seismic developments here in Washington that will impact Americans and our democracy for years to come. We are living in the thick of unprecedented upheaval around the country and the world, and we are all feeling its impact. Just this morning, our CBS News poll puts the number of Americans feeling that our democracy is under threat at 72%. For the first time in nearly 50 years, tens of millions of American women begin the week without the protection of a constitutional right to an abortion. It's a significant victory for the anti-abortion rights movement. But Friday's Supreme Court decision to direct states to regulate abortion on their own terms has resulted in chaos and confusion as to the ruling's practical impact and, not surprisingly, enormous anger from abortion rights supporters and fear sparked by rhetoric from those who think laws should be more restrictive. Just a day earlier, we saw dramatically different actions from the legislative and judicial branches on guns, as the Supreme Court cleared the way for nearly all American adults to carry concealed weapons in public. Meanwhile, just a few hundred yards away, Congress, who'd been crippled by inaction on significant gun control legislation for decades, responded to the recent massacres in Uvalde and Buffalo by passing a bipartisan law expanding background checks for gun buyers under 21, incentivizing state red flag laws, and providing states with funding for mental health and school safety. In the January 6th committee hearings, we heard testimony that President Trump repeatedly pressed some state election officials and Justice Department officials to interfere in the election with the knowledge that his actions were illegal. These fissures in our three branches of government and the test of our democracy come as President Biden joins world leaders in Germany to discuss ways to keep the global economy afloat and to counter Russian aggression. The challenges facing the president and our country are nothing short of enormous. These challenges are taking their toll on Americans' view of how Mr. Biden is handling his job. Our new CBS poll shows only 41% of Americans approve of his job. That's the lowest we've recorded for his presidency. We begin today with CBS News senior national correspondent Mark Strassmann in Atlanta.
Chaos in the Carolinas. Protesters squaring off in Greenville, South Carolina, one of many weekend flashpoints. In Iowa, this pickup truck's driver bowled right through abortion rights protesters. From noisy crowds in New York to Los Angeles, where a country convulsed by the Supreme Court's Dobbs decision. This constitutional milestone caps a half-century crusade by conservative activists.
A motto that my mom taught me in her ministry was, our job is not to make abortion illegal, it's to make it unthinkable.
Enraged abortion rights supporters say Dobbs robs women of a fundamental freedom.
My body, my choice!
And gives state lawmakers, mostly men, control over their bodies and futures.
We assumed that was going to be forever. It was accepted by the Supreme Court, by the Constitution of the United States. To have that threatened now, and other things being threatened now because of this caving in, it's very, very scary. It is scary to democracy. This is not democracy.
Within months, abortion could be illegal in roughly half the country. By the end of July, these 13 states will activate so-called trigger bans. In at least 7 states, it's already happened. All or most abortions now banned. In this group of states, the Dobbs decision could see anti-abortion legislation unblocked by lower courts or resurrect pre-Roe abortion bans. Abortion's future is uncertain in parts of America. And in 20 states, abortion rights remain solidly in place for now. Georgia is one of a dozen states to pass a so-called fetal heartbeat bill. The Dobbs decision could clear the way for them to become law and to end legal abortions at 6 weeks.
We will abolish abortion!
America's high fever over abortion makes a dialectic impossible. We're not going to talk this one out. And in many ways, Dobbs settles little. Abortion rights opponents, empowered, want more state restrictions.
This decision must not stand!
Abortion rights supporters, still standing, vow never to go back.
Mark Strassmann reporting there from Atlanta. One of the states fighting a restrictive abortion ban that predates Roe v. Wade is Michigan. Its Democratic Governor Gretchen Whitmer joins us this morning.
And I don't have a clip of Gretchen Whitmer, but as I often point out, CBS News Face the Nation cuts up the entire program into clips and uploads it to their YouTube channel at the link I put under sources in the video description, so you can actually watch the entire program, including the interview with Governor Gretchen Whitmer. That is one of the places where I think that this is the overturning of Roe v. Wade is going to be really politically helpful to Democrats running for governor in various states, where, like in Michigan, where if you watch that whole interview, she's basically the only thing standing between the Republican legislature in Michigan and the outlawing of abortion in Michigan. There's even this old law from 1931 or whatever that they're trying to challenge and might come back into life. It's one of those, like, because Roe versus Wade has been overturned. But anyway, I thought that was actually one of the best news summaries. I'm glad to see Mark Strassmann back. One thing nobody mentioned, and CBS News usually is the one, and they did mention Ukraine there, and I've talked about the problem with Ukraine fatigue and how that might be a way that Vladimir Putin is thinking he might win his invasion of Ukraine because America and the West, they stop focusing on it because there's always more news in the news cycle, and we're like 3 news cycles beyond at least weekly news cycles of the Sunday shows. Since Ukraine has been a story at all, Face the Nation mentioned it briefly. Jake Tapper, we'll talk about it a little more because he's in Germany at the G7 summit, but that wasn't talked about a lot. But also COVID, there's a huge upsurge in COVID going on that is not, that everybody's decided that, we're going to pretend it's not happening or something. I mean, CBS used to be like the COVID broadcasting system. I told that story over and over again about how in like February, March of 2020, they were like the only one of the Sunday shows who even covered COVID before it started happening, and now nobody's covering it. But you'll notice that in all the news summaries. But this next news summary is a news summary because it's, of course, the Fox News summary, and Fox isn't really a news organization. It was really difficult to watch Fox this after the overturning of Roe v. Wade because they spread so much misinformation. Here you'll see the host this week for Fox News Sunday since Chris Wallace left is Martha MacCallum, and she did not do a great job. I'm not even going to show you her whole interview with, had this whole interview with Lindsey Graham on, well, they did not mention the January 6th committee hearings anywhere on Fox News Sunday. They were the only one of the 5 shows never to mention it anywhere in the program. She had on Lindsey Graham, who made his own calls to public officials in Georgia about overturning the election results in Georgia in 2020. Never asked Senator Graham about that or anything, even though he said so many things that were wrong. And then she has Stacey Abrams on, and I'm going to show you a clip of Martha MacCallum's interview with Stacey Abrams. Stacey Abrams is running for governor of Georgia. Brad Raffensperger just testified in front of the January 6th committee, the Secretary of State of Georgia, about the attempt to overturn the election results in Georgia in 2020. Martha MacCallum, Fox News, never asked a question. Like I said, the whole topic never came up on Fox News, and they try to ignore it as much as they can. But there are also other things kind of disturbing about this report from Martha MacCallum and then Alexandria Hoff, mostly about the overturning of Roe v. Wade, but and of course the protests and the violence of the left is always in here, and I'll talk about that so-called news summary a little more after we watch it together over here.
And hello again from Fox News in Washington as the Supreme Court's monumental decision to overturn Roe v. Wade sinks in across the country. There's jubilation from those who never thought they would see this day and outrage from those who never thought they would witness this reversal as some clinics close their doors and some emotions spill into destruction and tear gas. Of around 25 people arrested. In Washington, thoughts turn, though, to the midterms, the political impact, and calls now for Congress to act on their own. But the decision is just one of the huge signs that the 3 justices nominated by then-President Trump are having an enormous effect on places like guns and school choice as well. This as Congress pulls off a bipartisan gun control bill, President Biden signing that into law yesterday. In a moment, we will break down the Supreme Court ruling with Fox News legal correspondent Shannon Bream, and we'll also get reaction, I should say, from Republican Senator Lindsey Graham of the Judiciary Committee and from Democrat Stacey Abrams, who's running for governor in Georgia. But first, we turn to Alexandria Hoff, who is live at the Supreme Court this morning, where protesters are likely to be gathering later this morning. Good morning to you, Alex.
Well, good morning, Martha. Yeah, all is still quiet here at this hour, but we do expect crowds to return at some point this afternoon for what will be the 3rd day in a row. The reaction from pro-life groups was instantaneous and joyous. Moments after the weight of what was lost for abortion advocates hit. 49 years, 5 months, and 2 days after the Roe v. Wade decision was handed down, it was undone, along with Planned Parenthood v. Casey, removing the federal constitutional right to an abortion. The majority opinion, authored by Justice Samuel Alito, reads, "We now overrule those decisions and return that authority to the people and their elected representatives." In the dissenting opinion, Justices Breyer, Kagan, and Sotomayor wrote, "In overruling Roe and Casey, this court betrays its guiding principles." The ruling transfers power over abortion policy to the states, 22 of which have either already or are now likely to ban abortion. 4 more have pending legislation.
It is my hope that the rest of America will follow Oklahoma's lead.
Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin also announced Friday that he will pursue a 15-week ban. But in Washington, D.C., plus at least 16 other states, there will be no reduction in abortion access. According to the pro-abortion rights research group, the Guttmacher Institute, 11 Democratic-led legislatures moved to expand access in anticipation of the ruling, and invitations have been extended.
You come to New York, so our providers will take care of you.
President Biden vowed to stand by the Department of Justice in guaranteeing a woman's right to travel for an abortion and made a plea Friday for the issue to become the cornerstone of the midterm elections.
We need to restore the protections of Roe as law of the land. We need to elect officials who will do that. This fall, Roe is on the ballot.
I woke up this morning praying for this, and I never thought that it would happen.
While Republican lawmakers celebrated the ruling, many Democrats took a tone of mourning.
Today is one of the darkest days our country has ever seen.
Some taking to the streets to join protesters.
We have to build the streets. Right now, elections are not enough.
On Friday, protesters also gathered in front of the home of conservative Justice Clarence Thomas. Earlier this month, Congress passed a bill expanding 24-hour protection of justices to include their families. Now, protests out here have remained peaceful. Yesterday, 2 people were taken into custody, though, after they appeared to pour red paint beyond this security gate behind me. They have so far cleaned that up. Martha?
Alex, thank you very much. Alex Hoff reporting from the Supreme Court. Joining me now, Fox News legal correspondent Shannon Bream. Shannon, great to have you with us.
I don't know. I have definitely come to the conclusion, or you can tell me what you think, but I noticed that Fox News Sunday, they not only had their host, Martha MacCallum, but then they had their reporter, Alexandria Hoff, and then they brought in legal analyst Shannon Bream. So, like, the first 3 people to comment on the overturning of Roe v. Wade on Fox News Sunday were all women. Do you think that's just a coincidence, or do you think that that is something that Fox News decided to do to put like a female face on this taking away of the right of women to control their own bodies? I don't know. You can let me know what you think in the comment section. And I mean, there were things in that news summary that they were, they focused on the protest. It's like Alexandria Hoff was out there in front of the Supreme Court, like the protesters are going to be here. They are going to protest, and they talked about the protesters at Clarence Thomas's house. At one point, at the end of the interview with Lindsey Graham, Martha MacCallum even talked about this federal law that they're been so gung-ho about arresting protesters who protest at judges' houses, because there's this law, 18 U.S.C. 1507, that says you can't do any protests that are meant to intimidate a judge, witness, or jury in a case trying to affect the outcome. But of course, Roe v. Wade's already been decided, so that law definitely doesn't apply anymore. And I think I even saw Jonathan Turley mention that in the coverage right after Roe v. Wade was overturned. But Martha MacCallum was still pushing that Fox News talking point about why isn't the Justice Department arresting people engaging in peaceful protests outside of Supreme Court justices' houses, which I think if you're peacefully protesting on a sidewalk, that the First Amendment should protect you. There's this whole case, Frisbee versus Schultz, that I don't want to get into, that where the Supreme Court might have said that you couldn't at least do targeted residential protesting. But if you walk the whole block, I don't know. It's kind of an open question, and I personally believe that it's protected by the part of the First Amendment that says you have the right to petition your government for the right to assemble, and to petition the government for redress of grievances. You're like that's like two clauses of the First Amendment at the same time. So, but this Supreme Court, who knows? And anyway, I wanted to move on to the next news summary here. It's NBC News's Meet the Press. Chuck Todd, this is kind of similar to the CBS News Face the Nation one, except it's Chuck Todd and then his big, long, pre-recorded video package, or as I like to say, Chuck Todd has a big, long package, but actually it's not as long as Mark Strassmann's this week, so I guess Chuck Todd doesn't have the biggest, longest package this week that we are always looking for, but you'll see here Chuck Todd does talk about Roe v. Wade, the January 6th committee hearing, the gun rulings, and I'll talk about all of that a little more after we watch that news summary from Meet the Press together over here.
Good Sunday morning. After a week that was among the most significant in our recent history. Even before the Roe decision, the January 6th committee heard evidence of an attempted coup led by a defeated president who sought any way possible to hold on to power. And we saw the Supreme Court significantly expand gun rights, even as President Biden signed the first gun safety bill into law in decades. But it was the court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade and nearly 5 decades of abortion rights that gripped the nation and prompted celebrations and bitterness from coast to coast. What we know is abortion is likely to be banned in roughly half the states. And Justice Clarence Thomas suggested birth control, gay rights, and same-sex marriage could be next. And we now know that Donald Trump's 2016 election, which gave him 3 Supreme Court picks, all of whom voted to overturn Roe, is easily now among the most consequential ever in our nation's history. What we don't know is the political fallout from all this. Will there be room in the Republican Party for people who actually want some abortion rights? Can Democrats channel their anger and frustration to win elections and pull even with Republicans for this November? And thanks to how this court was put together, its credibility has never been more in question. And this decision came at a time when the country is already dangerously divided.
It's a sad day for the court and for the country.
Today's historic Supreme Court decision is a victory for the sanctity of life.
Nearly 50 years after Roe.
In a landmark ruling, the Supreme Court today legalized abortions.
The decision by the High Court to eliminate the constitutional right to an abortion was met with celebrations and anger, with protests in cities across the country.
It's shocking. This is something that women should have a right to.
It's a roller coaster of emotion. It's complete and utter joy.
The justices decided 6-3 to uphold Mississippi's law banning abortion after 15 weeks. The case actually before the court. But then they went further, deciding 5-4 to overturn Roe. All 3 of Trump's appointees were in the majority. Chief Justice John Roberts said he would have taken a more measured course.
We couldn't be happier with this decision, and I've never been prouder to be a Mississippian.
We are headed down a dangerous spiral that will erode our democracy.
The decision set in motion trigger bans in 13 states. In 7 of those states, abortion is now already illegal. At least 24 states are certain or likely to ban abortion soon.
Swift action to certify Section 861 banned abortion in our state immediately.
We're fighting like hell here in Michigan to protect Michigan women's access to abortion and reproductive health care.
Now there are questions about health implications, from access to care, to fertility services, to emergency contraception, about the criminalization of abortion care, and about what's to come for other privacy rights.
The Supreme Court is a different branch of government. They can look at whatever comes before them.
Justice Clarence Thomas wrote in a concurrence, in future cases, we should reconsider all of this court's substantive due process precedents, including Griswold, Lawrence, and Obergefell, decisions on contraception, sex, and same-sex marriage. Alito's majority opinion differed, saying abortion is fundamentally different from those precedents. Now, without the votes in the Senate to codify Roe into law, Democrats are turning to November.
Roe is on the ballot.
Reproductive freedom is on the ballot.
The answer is simple. It's November.
It's the ballot box.
Hoping the abortion issue will divide Republicans, drive base turnout, and turn swing voters, suburban women in particular, from a focus on the economy to the fight over reproductive rights. One of the states with a trigger law was Arkansas. And hours after the Supreme Court released its opinion, the state officially banned all abortions except to save the life of the mother. There is no exception for rape or incest. So joining me now is the Republican governor of Arkansas, Asa Hutchinson. Governor Hutchinson, welcome back to
Oops, sorry. Took me a second there. But Governor Asa Hutchinson is actually one of the more reasonable Republicans, if you've been watching clips of him in the past, but he's still, he's wishes there were exceptions for rape and incest, but apparently there aren't going to be in Arkansas, at least not in the near future. And I don't have any clips of that interview, but I put links down in the video description to the source of all my clips, so you can watch the whole NBC News Meet the Press program. Some of the links I think require you to create an account or sign in or show you have cable or various ways you can access the full program. But usually there is a way if you jump through a few hoops. But anyway, I thought that was also a good news summary. A little and did show you about the difference between the 6-3 to uphold the Mississippi law, including John Roberts, but it was actually 5-4 to overturn Roe. And this, here it is. I don't know if this reminds me of something I talked about a while back about how I studied military history, and there was this book, Edward Luttwak's book about strategy, the logic of war and peace, and how there's this weird thing in war logic that sometimes you can win too much, you win so much that your troops go too far, and then your supply lines get overextended, and that actually leads to your defeat or something. And I was kind of thinking of that when I was thinking about how the Republicans may have gotten one too many justices, because, and I don't know, this is just sort of a theory. I don't know if this is actually going to happen, although I'll talk about it a little more. That there's some evidence that it might, where they stole the Obama appointment. Obama appointed Merrick Garland. They never gave him a hearing. They never gave him a vote. If they actually had, if the Senate had voted on Merrick Garland, he might have actually been confirmed as a Supreme Court justice, because you never know what the vote's going to be till you actually hold a vote. So I thought that was totally wrong for them to steal that seat that Obama should have at least had that chance to appoint by getting a vote in the Senate, and that was unprecedented. And then I've talked ad nauseum about how Brett Kavanaugh was rushed through despite lying about his drinking at Yale and the sexual assault allegations against him, especially by Deborah Ramirez at Yale. When I was in the same freshman class at Yale with Brett Kavanaugh and Deborah Ramirez, so I've talked. That's why I've talked about it ad nauseum, because I know way too many details about what happened in Lawrence Hall in the freshman year, 1983, 1984, and Brett Kavanaugh lied about at least his drinking behavior, and that's what his freshman roommate Jim Roche said, and whatever. Like I said, ad nauseum. I don't want to go into all that. So that's the middle appointment from the Trump administration. And then, of course, after the whole thing where they held up Merrick Garland for, 10 months because Obama's appointment was too close to the election, then they rammed through Amy Coney Barrett in the last, how close was it to the election? I can't even remember, but 8 weeks maybe. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, I remember she died in September before, I can't remember exactly how close it was to the election, but it was a lot closer than Scalia's death. And so, yeah, there's a lot of questions about the illegitimacy of a bunch of the appointments to the Supreme Court, and that makes me think that if they had just missed one of those, like if they hadn't held up Merrick Garland, if Trump had only gotten 2 seats instead of 3, then John Roberts, he would have gotten what he wanted, where they like upheld the Mississippi law, but did not overturn Roe v. Wade. That would have been the outcome. And if that were the outcome, the backlash, I think, would have been a lot smaller, because it would not have been this huge, like, fuck you to America from the Supreme Court. You know, we don't care what you think. We don't care about this right you've had for 50 years. That's right there as part of the substantive due process, a liberty guaranteed by the 14th Amendment, making you immune from having the states anymore tell people about their personal choices, intimate choices about marriage, family, and reproduction. You know, it's a big screw you from the court, or whatever I said. And if Roberts had gotten his way, it would have been a lot more subtle, and there still would be a constitutional right. It just wouldn't be viability 24 weeks. Now it would be Mississippi 15 weeks. And then there would be like more cases and more cases. And if Republicans had only gotten 2 more justices instead of 3, Roberts would have won, and Roe versus Wade would still be the law of the land, but it would be like much more, it would be completely weakened, but not with the backlash. So that was my whole logic of war and peace argument. Sorry, I like rambled on that and had the whole digression into Brett Kavanaugh, which makes me angry all the time. And now I'm going to get actually this news summary is, in some ways, it's like my favorite news summary, because it's like the most strident news summary, because I'm going to show you Martha MacCallum. No, not Martha MacCallum. Martha Raddatz. Excuse me. Not Fox News' Martha MacCallum. This is ABC News' Martha Raddatz, who's co-host of This Week with George Stephanopoulos. And she does the introduction, but then she brings on I can't remember his title, Terry Moran, chief White House correspondent, maybe. And Terry Moran has like the most strident reaction of all the news summaries to the overturning of Roe v. Wade. He it's pretty much what I've been saying, and about how this right has been taken away, and it's unprecedented, and it's like a huge anti-freedom move by this radical Supreme Court. Or, well, you'll hear what Terry Moran says, but then at the very end, I was thinking, why do they have like it's almost the opposite of Fox News Sunday, where they had 3 women in a row. Why do they have Terry Moran, this guy, like explaining to, or not explaining, I should say mansplaining to Martha Raddatz about what she's lost in the clip I'll talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
Good morning and welcome to This Week. On Friday morning, women in this country, like they have for nearly 50 years, woke up with a constitutional right to abortion, a right enshrined by the Supreme Court's 1973 decision in Roe v. Wade and reaffirmed again and again. But just after 10 a.m. on Friday, a legal earthquake, the court stripping women of that fundamental right. In a 6-3 decision, the conservative majority upheld Mississippi's ban on abortion after 15 weeks of pregnancy, with 5 of those justices voting to go even further, overturning Roe v. Wade. The first time an individual right of this magnitude, set in decades of precedent, has been taken away. Since the announcement, abortion rights activists have swarmed the court and launched protests across the country, alongside anti-abortion rights groups celebrating a landmark legal and political victory decades in the making. Abortion is now a matter for the states and Congress, a decision for voters and their elected leaders, rather than between a woman and her doctor. The decision had an immediate effect. As of this morning, abortion is now illegal in 8 states. 7 additional states had passed so-called trigger laws that automatically went into effect once Roe was overturned. And in the coming weeks and months, a total of 26 states are expected to ban or severely restrict abortion. Just 16 states, plus Washington, D.C., have laws that explicitly protect access to abortion care. President Biden called Friday's decision a sad day for the court and for the country, and talked about the steps the administration will take in the wake of the ruling. Amid so much uncertainty, what does seem clear is the emergence of a new era in which the Supreme Court, like so much of the rest of the country, is mired by partisan divide. It's all certain to keep the court at the center of a political battle to come this fall in the midterm elections. We will cover all the fallout from the landmark ruling and the state of play for reproductive rights across the country, including interviews with South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem and Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren. But we begin with our ABC team covering the very latest. And Terry Moran, you have covered the court for so many years. The shock of this may have been tempered by the leak of the draft opinion in May, but you cannot overstate how important and what an impact this will have.
Martha, this is the most consequential Supreme Court decision in decades. It changes the status of American women as citizens of the United States and as citizens of their states. That's the big picture, but let's not mince words. Women will die because of this ruling. We already have a disgraceful rate of maternal mortality, but from now on, doctors in many states will have to ask themselves, in pregnancies where there are serious complications, a split placenta or placenta in a dangerous position, will the local prosecutor, will the local jury think my patient is in enough danger for me to perform what I otherwise would consider a medically necessary abortion? And in 11 states already, including Texas and Florida, state governments can seize control of the bodies of women who have been raped or who are victims of incest and compel them to carry the baby, the child of their rapist, to term. This is a different world for women in America.
It certainly is. And I want to turn to you, Dan Abrams, our chief legal analyst at the...
And they had their legal analyst on after that. But, everything Terry Moran said there was true. I mean, women are going to die because of this decision. For example, childbirth is always more dangerous to a woman than, is always more dangerous to a woman than an abortion at every point in her pregnancy. In fact, I think I did some Twitter argument with somebody about this for several weeks back that went on forever, where I found the Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecology article from, I think it was 2012 or something, that showed that on average, it varies throughout the pregnancy, but on average, continuing with the pregnancy is 14 times more dangerous to a woman than having an abortion. So just making women continue with pregnancies instead of having an abortion, that's going to increase their risk. And not giving them a choice. Most women who are, women generally are the best ones to decide how to, what is the risk that they're willing to take and what is it they want to do with their own bodies. And that is, women are going to die. I actually almost took a couple clips from, I was going to do Asa Hutchinson versus Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, because Asa Hutchinson, one of the first things he said in his interview with Chuck Todd on NBC News' Meet the Press is that this is going to save lives, this decision of overturning Roe v. Wade, but it's actually going to cost the lives of women. And Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, in her first response to Asa Hutchinson, she made that really clear. Of course, Chuck Todd never followed up, but I just wanted to make that point that Terry Moran's right about that. He's right about doctors having to worry that their decisions about what's medically necessary, and remember the term medically necessary, that's going to be really important when I get to Martha MacCallum's attempt to cross-examine Stacey Abrams on how late in pregnancy should abortions be allowed. It's as long as it's medically necessary. That's what's important. It's a medical decision, not a political decision. And now doctors are going to have to think about, are they going to be prosecuted? Just like Terry Moran said, he talked about states that are commandeering women's bodies from them. Was it mansplaining? I don't know. You can let me know what you think about whether Terry Moran was mansplaining to Martha Raddatz in that last clip. But anyway, here's the last and shortest of the news summaries. It's Jake Tapper over in Köln, Germany. And he talks about the G7 summit because that's where he is, and a little bit about Ukraine, and of course about the overturning of Roe v. Wade in the final news summary. I'll talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
Hello, I'm Jake Tapper, live in Köln, Germany, at the site of the G7 Global Summit. President Biden is on the world stage this morning, meeting with fellow leaders of Western democracies, in addition to the U.S. and Germany. The other five in the G7, or Group of Seven, are Canada, France, Italy, Japan, and the United Kingdom, whose prime minister we just interviewed. They are here to try to figure out how to stave off a global recession and ensure stability at a time of autocratic muscle flexing, especially Russia's war on Ukraine, where missiles hit the capital of Kyiv just hours ago, and where Russia seems to be gaining ground in the east. The world looks much different than when this group met a year ago. Coming up, I'll speak exclusively with Secretary of State Antony Blinken ahead of President Biden's remarks this morning. And as I mentioned, of course, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who just survived a no-confidence vote at home and is trying to ensure that no one in the G7 goes wobbly on Ukraine. But overshadowing President Biden's visit here, seismic societal upheaval back at home after the U.S. Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade Friday, and abortion immediately became illegal for millions of American girls and women, depending on where they live. The news was celebrated by some, while others were dismayed and warned the U.S. would return to a time of unsafe back-alley abortions and more impoverished mothers. I want to begin there with one of the most prominent Democrats on the ballot this year, running in Georgia, where women are likely to have just a few weeks more to obtain abortions after the state asked an appeals court to allow a so-called heartbeat abortion ban to go into effect. And joining me right now is the Democratic candidate.
That's Stacey Abrams, the Democratic candidate for governor in Georgia. I will have a clip of Jake Tapper doing his interview of Stacey Abrams clip after next, but before that I have the Martha MacCallum interview on Fox News Sunday. I guess I've often talked about the media bias for like their special guests or their special locations, and I don't know, do you think Jake Tapper like focused too much on what was going on in Europe because he happened to be in Köln, Germany or whatever? And then the one thing that was, kind of disturbed me about that CNN State of the Union news summary from Jake Tapper is he started the program without telling us what's the State of the Union this week. That's like a convention he started right when he took over the program, and what happened? No State of the Union this week. That, I don't know, is it like some convention that, the saying what the State of the Union is stops at the water, the water's edge or whatever? No, they've even done it overseas before. What was that all about? Just couldn't come up with the State of the Union this week? Sorry, Jake. You disappointed me. I want to know. Anyway, maybe in the comment section, if you want to, you can let me know what you think the State of the Union was this week. Well, I kind of got that from my Super Chat contributors. Lulu Girl. State of the Union this week, rough week. Thank you, Lulu Girl, for that Super Chat contribution a little while ago. And as Tom Trask said, you got that right, Lulu Girl. It was that's what Jake Tapper should have said. State of the Union this week is rough week, but he didn't give it to us. Didn't tell us, so I feel underinformed by Jake Tapper this week. And before I get to Jake Tapper's interview with Stacey Abrams, this is part of the Fox News interview with Stacey Abrams, which so many of the questions were based on these like specious false premises, and Stacey Abrams did such an excellent job. I actually recommend watching her entire interview. But here's Martha MacCallum trying to get her to buy into sort of like the sophistry, the specious reasoning of the, you know, all the way up to the 9th month argument that you hear from the anti-choice people, where it's the whole point is it shouldn't be up to government officials, politicians in the state houses. Oh, I know we need a new kitten, Lulu girl, but it's still a little too soon. I thank you for that super chat contribution, though. I'll talk about that a little bit at the end of the live stream. But the whole argument from from anti-choice people is, you know, they want to allow abortion all the way up to the 9th month, but the question is it medically necessary? Remember the term medically necessary from the previous news summary? That's the question. No woman wants to undergo an abortion in the 9th month of pregnancy. No doctor wants to perform an abortion in the 9th month of pregnancy. The only time it happens in very rare instances where it's medically necessary. It's a medical question. And what is medically necessary already has all sorts of legal regulation. Civil liability is already there. If you do something that's not medically necessary, the legal liability is already high for doctors. So Stacey Abrams is making a really important point in response to Martha MacCallum's questioning. And then in the middle, there's like this follow-up question, which I think you can let me know what you think, but I think Martha MacCallum, Fox News anchor of Fox News Sunday here, literally plays the race card. Literally plays the race card with Stacey Abrams in the middle of this clip. I'll talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
We are seeing in different states that there will be different limitations based on when people would be able to get an abortion. Do you support any limitation on abortion, or do you think that women should have the right to have an abortion all the way up to 9 months?
I believe an abortion is a medical decision, and I believe that should be a choice made between a doctor and a woman and in consultation with her family. But I think the challenge that we have is that we keep putting this in a political space. This is a medical decision, and the medical choices that should be made should be governed by what is best for that woman and what is best at the suggestion of and advice of their doctor.
But so you used to be pro-life, and you say that you then converted to being pro-choice. You say it's a medical decision. A lot of people would disagree with that. A lot of people would say it's a decision about life and respecting life. I want to play this soundbite for you from another woman in leadership. This is Virginia Lieutenant Governor Winsome Sears, and she's talking in this soundbite about the situation in Virginia, and I want to get your thoughts on it on the other side.
2019, 15,000 plus abortions were done. 46% of them were done by black women. Now, if the KKK had said we will pay for every black woman to have an abortion who wants one, we would say to ourselves, wait a minute, something's up. Why don't they want us to have our babies? But you see that we don't understand what's going on, and so we're losing so many black lives that matter.
Do you think that she has a point in terms of losing so many black lives that matter? I've heard that sentiment from other people as well.
I think that's a very specious argument that's used to cloak what is, I think, a deeply disturbing approach to this conversation. In fact, during my tenure in the legislature, I beat back a bill that was designed to deny access to this medical decision using race as a divisive tactic. And I reject that. Black women in Georgia face the highest maternal mortality rate. They're 3 times more likely to die. We know that Black women are the most likely to be underserved by their medical care. And we know that sometimes the choice that they need to make medically, economically, and personally is to have an abortion. If Lieutenant Governor Sears or others want to address the racial dimensions, then we have to address all of the racial dimensions. The likelihood of Black women being underpaid, the likelihood of Black women living in broken public health infrastructures, the likelihood of them not having access to Medicaid and not having access to insurance, which tends to lead to worse pregnancies and worse outcomes. We cannot cherry pick when we pay attention to the lives and safety of women, and that is the deepest challenge that we face here in Georgia.
But
Brian Kemp
what about the lives and safety?
Medicaid.
What about the lives and safety of the child?
Brian Kemp has refused to expand Medicaid in the state of Georgia. He has refused to support women at every stage of their lives when they are trying to make the best choices for themselves and their families. And the reality is, if we care about the medical needs of women, especially Black women, then we have to care the entire time.
I understood, but I'm just asking you. I asked you about when you see. I asked you if you believe in it all the way up to 9 months. So I'm just asking you. You're talking about caring about the lives of women. I'm just asking, at what point do you start to care about the life of that baby girl in some cases?
What I would say is that it is a medical decision. I don't know of a single woman who reaches the stage where this decision is easy. That is not the case. And so this is a medical conversation. And while we are absolutely compelled to have these difficult conversations, they should not be political ones. I should not be making decisions without having true understanding of the facts, and nor should any other political leader. This is not a political issue.
So I'm going
to
take that as up to 9 months in some cases, depending on the woman. Correct?
That is not what I said. I said this is a medical decision, and the medical decisions that have to be made in context. This is a specious approach to try to denude the entire argument. And the reality is abortion and reproductive care is personal, and it is singular, and it should be made between a woman and her doctor. I do not have either the experience or the capacity to know what is happening with others.
Okay, I want to move on. We could talk about this a lot longer, I'm sure, but I want to ask you a little bit about this recent headline in an interview that you did with Axios, and the title is "Stacey Abrams Wants to Fund the Police."
Yeah, so I think I pre-criticized that clip pretty well as to what Martha MacCallum was doing there. And Stacey Abrams, I'm a huge fan of Stacey Abrams. I think she might be the first Black woman president, if it's not Kamala Harris, who I'm not such a fan of. I hope Stacey Abrams is the first Black woman president before Kamala Harris, honestly. But and I hope she becomes the governor of Georgia in this next election against Brian Kemp. But she, I think, made the argument really effectively about what is at stake in this decision, and especially, like I said before I showed the clip about the talking point about all the way up to the 9th month or all the way up to birth, where we're talking about what's medically necessary, and it's not a decision that politicians should make. Doctors and their patients decide what is medically necessary to protect the life or health of the mother, and in rare instances where there are pregnancies that are really dangerous to women, that aren't going to result in a viable, the pregnancies aren't going to be viable. It's going to be like a stillbirth, or there are all sorts of like terrible situations where women need to get abortions near the end of a pregnancy, that the doctor and the patient should decide based on all the things that Stacey Abrams just said. I don't know what's going on in that situation. That's what doctors and patients should decide about what's medically necessary, and what's medically necessary is already heavily regulated. And like I said, I already pretty much pre-criticized that clip beforehand. But here is Jake Tapper talking to Stacey Abrams. The other thing I wanted to say is right after that clip, you saw Martha MacCallum was going to ask her about her editorial saying we should fund the police. which puts Stacey Abrams a little closer to Kamala Harris, the former Attorney General of California, who was too pro-cop for me, which I talked about back during the primaries before the 2020 election. As someone here in California, I have a lot of experience with Kamala Harris as the district attorney in San Francisco and then the Attorney General of California. But here you see Stacey Abrams talk, or Martha MacCallum asked Stacey Abrams about this editorial. She said we need to fund the police, but then showed a clip from a political attack ad on her taken out of context. But Martha MacCallum didn't show the whole context. She just showed the clip from the political attack ad where we said, oh yeah, we should reallocate some funds that are going to go to the police, even though Stacey Abrams never said defund the police. But anyway, this next clip is actually Stacey Abrams, instead of going up against Republican talking points, actually pushing Democrats and specifically Joe Biden to go further. This is like, what should Joe Biden do? And I actually like what Stacey Abrams says more than what Joe Biden said, and I'll talk about that a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
President Biden has vowed to protect women and girls' access to abortion pills and contraception, as well as their ability to cross state lines to seek an abortion if they want to. Republican state lawmakers across the country are already working to pass even further restrictions. Do you think what President Biden is doing is enough, or do you think he needs to do more?
I think President Biden should do what is within the purview of the executive. I believe that we need a legislative solution that restores the constitutional protection to women regardless of the state they live in. State lines should not determine the quality of your citizenship in the United States. We know that in Georgia, a law has already been proposed that would expand the restrictions in the state. We know that Brian Kemp has already signaled his at least an ambiguity about how he feels about birth control and the laws that govern birth control access. And so it is very, very dangerous for women in Georgia right now. We need new leadership, and we need new leadership that can work with the President of the United States to provide the protections, to provide the health care, and to provide the sanity of good laws that can help women and their families thrive in our state.
There are a lot of progressives, as you know, who are calling on President Biden to expand the size of the Supreme Court. Do you think Biden should do that?
I know how the law works, and it is not up to President Biden. This is a choice that has to be made by our both executive and legislative branch, but I do think that we have to recognize that there's nothing sacrosanct about 9 members in the United States Supreme Court, but that is a long-term question. What we have to focus on right now is the danger that this Dobbs decision presents to women in the state of Georgia and across the country. As someone who is pro-choice and proudly pro-choice, I believe that we need leaders right now who are willing to defend who we are and to defend the women under our care. We have to be deeply concerned about what is happening to our LGBTQ community, to people of color, especially Black women who face the highest rates of maternal mortality in the nation, and that is it's exacerbated in the state of Georgia. I believe that we need to do more. And I want the president to do more. I want our Congress to do more. But we've got to recognize that the stage that we're in right now, it is left to the states. And that's why I encourage people to go to StaceyAbrams.com to learn more about my plan to protect women in the state of Georgia.
Well, in more short term, do you think that the Senate should eliminate the filibuster to codify Roe versus Wade into law? Would you support that?
I would support lifting it for Roe v. Wade. I would support lifting it for voting rights. These are constitutional issues. I believe, and I've said this very consistently, that when we are talking about fundamental protections that should be accorded to every citizen in our country, then the filibuster is wrong. And we should suspend the filibuster with regards to voting rights, and we should suspend the filibuster with regards to making certain that we can protect the constitutional right to privacy and the ability of women to make choices for themselves and their bodies.
Do you think this ruling might help you defeat Governor Kemp?
henceforth, but also what I believe that the president and the Democratic Party needs to come to terms with is that this is not just a crisis of Roe, this is a crisis of our democracy. The Supreme Court has dramatically overreached its authority. We had 2 conservative senators.
Oh, there we go. You can hear me now? Ha! I was muted. No, I saw. I don't know how long I was muted there when I was talking. I don't know why I was muted. I don't know what happened there. Sorry about that. Anyway, no, I'm not muted now. I'm okay. But I don't know all the things I said that were muted. I apologize for that. I don't know exactly how that happened. But apparently I was muted there for some of the commentary I was making before. I was talking about how Stacey Abrams was talking about the need to expand the court and the illegitimacy of the court, and that's also what Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez talked about when she was responding to a question about what the Biden administration can do, and she did a great transition into attacking what's going on with the Supreme Court, which I will talk about with you a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
Henceforth, but also what I believe that the president and the Democratic Party needs to come to terms with is that this is not just a crisis of Roe, this is a crisis of our democracy. The Supreme Court has dramatically overreached its authority. We had 2 conservative senators in the United States Senate, Senator Manchin and Senator Collins, come out with a very explosive allegation that several Supreme Court justices misled them during their confirmation hearings and in the lead up to their confirmation. This is a crisis of legitimacy. We have a Supreme Court justice whose wife participated in January 6th and who used his seat to vote against providing documents that potentially led to evidence of such to investigators in Congress. This is a crisis of legitimacy, and President Biden must address that.
It's interesting you say that. I want to put up the Joe Manchin quote in particular on his reaction, because he used the word, he said, they testified under oath. He made sure that was in his release. It sounds like you believe, okay, that he might as well be saying they lied to him, that he feels like they lied to him and they lied under oath. You think the House Judiciary Committee should begin the process of an investigation there?
If we allow Supreme Court nominees to lie under oath and secure lifetime appointments to the highest court of the land and then issue without basis, if you read these opinions, issue without basis rulings that deeply undermine the human and civil rights of the majority of Americans, we must see that through. There must be consequences for such a deeply destabilizing action and hostile takeover of our democratic institutions. To allow that to stand is to allow it to happen. And what makes it particularly dangerous is that it sends a blaring signal to all future nominees that they can now lie to duly elected members of the United States Senate in order to secure Supreme Court confirmations and seats on the Supreme Court. This is what we're saying.
Do you think lying in a confirmation hearing is an impeachable offense?
I believe so.
Okay.
I believe so. I believe lying under oath is an impeachable offense. I believe that violating federal law in not disclosing income from political organizations, as Clarence Thomas did years ago, is also potentially an impeachable offense. I believe that that not recusing from cases that one clearly has family members involved in with very deep violations of conflict of interest are also impeachable offenses. And I believe that this is something that should be very seriously considered, including by senators like Joe Manchin and Susan Collins.
I want to ask you a slightly bigger picture question here. Jason Lincolns wrote this in the New Republic, and it seemed to...
Is this not working? Hello? Oh, okay, finally. Geez. Hello? It had something to... I don't know why it did that, but... Hello? Hello? No? God damn it. Hello? No? Okay. No. Wait. Hold on. I think you can hear me. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? What am I like? I'm like one of those cell phone commercials. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me? Hello? Hello? Okay, there we go. Can you hear? Okay, you can hear me now. Finally. Whatever. That last clip of AOC, I think that I thought that she was one of the best advocates for what we should be doing in response to the overturning of Roe v. Wade. And I'm sorry for all the technical difficulties. I don't know why that happened like this week. It's not like I haven't been doing this show for over a year and then the previous show for 8 years, and then like my microphone goes out for no apparent reason. I don't know why. But then here's Elizabeth Warren kind of going in the same direction as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in the final Democrat, before I showed the long Kristi Noem clip on CBS News' Face the Nation. But here's Elizabeth Warren talking to Martha Raddatz on ABC News' This Week with George Stephanopoulos over here.
You and President Biden are saying that Roe is now on the ballot. Indeed it is. Go to the polls, you say. President Biden says go to the polls. But look at the states outlawing abortion. Those are largely conservative states. Governor Noem had a point there. People go to the polls. They went to the polls, just like your constituents in Massachusetts, where abortion is legal. So why not leave it to the states?
Look, we have never left individual rights to the states. The whole idea is that women are not second-class citizens, and the government is not the one that will decide about the continuation of a pregnancy. You know, there's no equivalent there for men. So what we believe is that access to abortion, like other medical procedures, should be available across the board to all people in this country. Now, we've got a lot of things on our agenda right now. First of all, we need to help the women who are pregnant right now and need help, and that means sending resources to the states like New Mexico, you know, that border other states that are going to try to help out. It means getting involved by volunteering, by sending money. It also means asking the President of the United States to make abortion as available as possible with the tools he has, including medication abortion, including using federal lands as a place where abortions can occur. But it's also focused like a laser on the election in November. And we get 2 more senators on the Democratic side, 2 senators who are willing to protect access to abortion and get rid of the filibuster so that we can pass it. And yes, John Fetterman, I'm looking at you in Pennsylvania. Mandela Barnes, I'm looking at you in Wisconsin. We bring them in, then we've got the votes, and we can protect every woman, no matter where she lives.
You know, you saw Justice Thomas's concurring opinion, I know, calling on the court to reconsider rulings, striking down state restrictions, contraception, gay marriage. Are you concerned about that? You also heard what the rest of the court said about that.
I am deeply concerned about that. I understand that the rest of the court said, no, we're not going there. But remember how we got to where we are. When Roe versus Wade first came down, there was a tiny minority that really put a lot of energy into, in effect, for themselves and for Republicans, putting Roe on the ballot over and over. But on the ballot didn't mean try to get it through the Congress, because they knew they couldn't do that. They're not even close to having national support for that. So instead, it was about getting extremist judges into the United States Supreme Court. And let's see how much credibility those justices have now. Replay the tapes of one after another saying that Roe versus Wade is settled law and no one disturbs settled law.
And I was going to ask you about that, Senator.
As soon as they can count the numbers, they toss it out.
And Senator Susan Collins, who voted for Justice Kavanaugh, as well as Joe Manchin, have said they were misled. Do you think the process should change now?
Of confirming
justices.
You know, look, I understand that Justice Kavanaugh, for example, I don't know what he said to Senator Collins. I wasn't in the room. But I do know this, that the Republicans have been very overt about trying to get people through the court who didn't have a published record on Roe, but who they knew, wink, wink, nod, nod, were going to be extremists on the issue of Roe versus Wade. And that is exactly what we have ended up with. This court has lost legitimacy. They have burned whatever legitimacy they may still have had after their gun decision, after their voting decision, after their union decision. They just took the last of it and set a torch to it with the Roe versus Wade opinion. I believe we need to get some confidence back in our court, and that means we need more justices on the United States Supreme Court.
And I know that's something you support. Thank you.
It's happened before. We've done it before. We need to do it again.
Thanks very much for joining us this morning, Senator.
again. Hello? Hello? Oh, there we go. Finally. I don't know why that... And I don't know why I'm having these streaming problems. But I thought Elizabeth Warren also did a good job of explaining the problems with the Supreme Court, kind of in the way that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez did in the previous clip. And my criticism of Martha MacCallum in that Martha Raddatz in that last clip is like she didn't follow up. Maybe she ran out of time, but she didn't follow up right at the end there on expanding the court. That, I really wanted to hear more, and she said, "Oh, sorry, interview over." But anyway, I want to show you one final clip. It's this is the Republican woman and possible presidential candidate in 2024. I've heard Kristi Noem may be running for president, even though I made that Keebler elf joke about her earlier. And this is, I thought Margaret Brennan did a really good job of pointing out how she wasn't answering questions about the conflict between South Dakota law and what the federal government is doing. And hopefully I will talk about that a little more with this microphone working after we watch that final clip together over here.
State and has a new memoir out titled Not My First Rodeo, Lessons from the Heartland. Good morning to you, Governor.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me on, Margaret.
I'm hoping you can clarify some things because I know under South Dakota law, abortions are now criminal acts. Only exceptions if it's necessary to preserve the life of a pregnant female. You're calling a special session. What exactly do you want to change or implement here?
Well, what happened with the Supreme Court decision this week is that abortions in the state of South Dakota immediately became illegal unless it was to save the life of a mother. And so that was in place as soon as that decision was made. And what I believe will happen is that if we do go into a special session, that there'll be debate around how we can support these mothers. I've already launched a website it's called life.sd.gov, and it's to get resources to individuals who have an unplanned pregnancy or if they're in a crisis situation, that will coordinate financial assistance, people that will come alongside them during this time, also make sure that they get health care and access that they may need. It lists all the nonprofits, different organizations that work with them, and then also connects them to families that may want to adopt their baby should they choose to give their baby up for adoption. So it's an incredible resource that does more to support these women that are in a situation that was unplanned and really does leave them in a situation where they're not prepared for the news that they have that they're expecting a baby.
Okay. On that, though, America has the worst maternal mortality rate of any developed country. What specifically are you doing for these women who, not just when they have the baby, but during their pregnancy? Are you giving them paid leave? Are you giving them more health care rights in your state? Are you giving them more state funding? What exactly are you doing to keep them alive during their pregnancy?
I think that will be a lot of the debate that will go on now in every different state. Now that the Supreme Court has made this decision, the power to make these decisions really goes to each individual state. We've already talked about that in South Dakota. What's the state's role in this, and what can we do to help these individuals that are in these situations get them the health care that they need to help their baby be born healthy and help them be parents, or help them choose a loving family to raise that child.
So you're still figuring out the specifics. Okay.
Well, and this trigger law was put into place years ago, and it was to go into law as soon as the Supreme Court made a decision such as it did. So that's the debate and discussion that we're having. But I think what's incredible and what's going on is that the people will decide. Elected officials at the state level is who they'll be talking to decide what their state's laws look like. South Dakota's obviously, under our past several years and have stood for life and defending life. And I think we'll continue to have those debates on how we can support these mothers and what it means to really make sure that we're not prosecuting mothers ever in a situation like this when it comes to abortion, that it will always be focused towards those doctors who knowingly break the law to perform abortions in our state.
So there's a lot of confusion here. So South Dakota is one of 30 states that will limit access to telemedicine abortions, which allow patients to receive these pills in the mail that would allow them to end their pregnancy. The president has said he's going to use the Justice Department to intervene here if there's an attempt to stop women from receiving these pills. Are you prepared for that kind of legal battle? Are you actually going to seize mail? How would you stop women from actually receiving this federally approved medication?
Well, we've already addressed this in many ways in the state of South Dakota. I brought a bill that would ban telemedicine abortions, which means a doctor over the internet or over the phone could prescribe an abortion for an individual, because these are very dangerous medical procedures. A woman is 5 times more likely to end up in an emergency room if they're utilizing this kind of
This is an FDA-approved drug.
So it's something that should be under the supervision of a medical doctor, and it is something in South Dakota that we've made sure happens that way.
But that's what I'm asking you for specifics of, because
are at the state level.
Because at the state level,
the debate that
right. But what is happening here is incredibly important and precedent setting. This is a federally approved drug. Are you saying the state of South Dakota is now going to overrule the FDA and decide which drugs are going to be available to its residents?
And many of those decisions are made at the state level. They absolutely are. That's what states do.
Will you stop, if it's sent in mail, will you intercede and stop it from being received?
There's certain protections that are guarded under the Constitution of the United States. The rest of these items are left to the states. The 10th Amendment guarantees us that. What the Supreme Court said was that the Constitution does not give a woman the right to have an abortion. That means that at each state, they will make the decision how they handle these situations.
Exactly. And
in South Dakota, we've already had a bill pass that said on telemedicine abortions that we don't believe it should be available because it is a dangerous situation for those individuals without being medically supervised by a physician.
Okay, so it sounds like you're ready to fight the Justice Department on that one. Let me ask you about something else the president said. He said that his administration will oppose any state governments that try to block the mail, search a person's medicine cabinet, or control a woman's actions by tracking data on apps that she uses. Is South Dakota going to do that kind of surveillance or adopt laws like Oklahoma and Texas have, which incentivize civilians to report on their neighbors?
Margaret, that's never been the conversation in South Dakota, and I don't anticipate that we will ever do that. We take privacy rights very important. We protect our freedoms and our liberties here. We will make sure that mothers have the resources, protection, and medical care that they need, and we're being aggressive on that. And we'll also make sure that the federal government only does its job. We saw in unprecedented ways that this administration has been overstepping its authority, and they've been punishing the American people, and we're seeing increased energy costs, supply chain challenges, freedoms taken away. It's been incredible the amount of problems this country is having because of the discussion and the debate and the policies out of the Biden administration. My job as governor is to do my job, and that's protect my people from these bad policies.
So how are you going to handle corporations?
So, oh, look, the microphone works after the clip. What a miracle. I don't know what was going on with my microphone today, and my apparently my internet speed, upload speed wasn't fast enough for the whole live stream. It was a problem. I apologize for that. Hopefully it'll be better by next Monday. I showed you there Kristi Noem, possible Republican presidential candidate in 2024, outsider, I guess, but I don't know. Did you buy that? I actually thought Margaret Brennan did a pretty good job of cross-examining her, and anyway, I showed you one Republican woman and then 3 different Democrats responding to the overturning of Roe v. Wade. I committed legal analysis as promised, and I don't have any clips at the end of any special pets. No more Dash, no more Sandy. It's going to be weeks at least, probably months, maybe sometime in August till there's a change in that situation. I'll continue giving you updates at the end of my live streams, but I will be back next Monday for my Monday Media Mix-Up. I wasn't able to do the live streams after the January 6th committee hearings I'd hoped for last week, but Maybe I'll be able to make up for that when they do another couple committee hearings in a couple weeks. But anyway, until I have some reason to upload a video, or until next Monday,